Hello and welcome to Lecture 9. In this lecture, we'll learn how to develop an effective ethics program. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to achieve the following. Understand the need of organizational ethics program to avoid legal problems. Know the difference between value and compliance control systems and the minimum requirement for ethical compliance program. And build familiarity about the common mistakes in designing or implementing an ethics program. In Lecture 8, we learned that interpersonal relations influence ethical decision-making. One of the important points that we learned about interpersonal relations was the responsibility of corporations as a moral agent. And in this lecture, we'll learn more about the nuances of developing an effective ethics program within an organization. This enables an organization to better adjust to the role of moral agent. Corporations are viewed not merely as profit-making entities, but also as moral agents accountable for their conduct to their employees, investors, suppliers, and customers. The companies viewed as moral agents are required to obey the laws and regulations that defines acceptable business conduct and provide formal structural restraint and guidance on ethical issues. This can be achieved through an effective ethical program. One of the most important needs in an organization today is to groom its employees to make ethical decisions. To understand the importance, we'll look at 5 situations an employee may face in an organization. You may want to put yourself in these situations and note whether the situation is unethical or illegal in your opinion. Situation 1. You want to skip work to go to a sporting match, but you need a doctor's excuse, so you make up some symptoms and the insurance company pays for the doctor's visit. Note down whether you consider this action as unethical or illegal. Situation 2. While having a latte at a coffee shop, you run into an acquaintance who works as a salesperson at a competing firm. By chance, you wind up chatting with him about future product prices. When you get back to your office, you tell your supervisor what you've heard. Would you consider this action as unethical or illegal? Situation 3. You are fired from your company, but before leaving to take a position with another company, you take a confidential list of client names and telephone numbers that you had compiled for your employer. Would you consider this action as unethical or illegal? Situation 4. You receive a loan from your parents to make the down payment on your first home, but when describing the source of your down payment on the mortgage application, you characterize it as a gift. Would you consider this action as unethical or illegal? Situation 5. Your manager asks you to book some sales revenue from the next quarter into this quarter's sales report to help reach target sales figures. You agree to do so. Would you consider this action as unethical or illegal? Probably you would have labelled one or more of these 5 situations as unethical rather than illegal. But in reality, all of them are illegal. Therefore, ethics programs enable employees to be aware of the potential legal and ethical issues within their working environment. Employees are not legal experts and therefore need guidance with legal issues impacting on their jobs. Understanding the factors that influence ethical decision-making can help companies encourage ethical behaviour. No understanding or knowledge of ethical issues can lead to unethical behaviour. Unethical behaviour may have a negative impact on the stakeholders. For example, scandals will lower the public's trust of business. Therefore, the CEOs of an organisation are recommended 5 aspects for building trust and confidence in firms. 1. Making customers the top priority. 2. Assuming personal responsibility and accountability. 3. Communicating openly and frequently with customers. 4. Handling crises more honestly. 5. Sticking to the code of business ethics no matter what situation. To take corrective action, it is imperative to identify the cause of ethical issues appropriately. The ethical issue may reside at an individual level or at the organisational policy level. Let's learn more about this through the bad apple, bad barrel analogy. 1. Bad apples. Some people are simply bad apples who will always do things in their own self-interest, regardless of their organisation's goals or accepted standards of conduct. Eliminating such bad apples through screening techniques and enforcement of the firm's ethical standards can help improve the firm's overall behaviour. 2. Bad barrels. Organisations also can become bad barrels, not because the individuals within them are bad, but because the pressures to succeed create opportunities that reward unethical decisions. In the case of such bad barrels, the firms must redesign their image and culture to conform to industry and social standards of acceptable behaviour. We have now learnt about the need for organisational ethics programs. Next, we'll focus on the 3 main characteristics of an effective ethics program. 1. Adherence to code of conduct. 2. Socialisation. 3. Utility of leadership. Let's discuss each of these in more detail. Adherence to code of conduct. An effective ethics program helps ensure that all employees understand the organisation's values and comply with the policies and codes of conduct that create its ethical climate. Socialisation. As we come from diverse business, educational and family backgrounds, it cannot be assumed that we know how to behave appropriately when we enter a new organisation or job. So an effective ethical program should sensitise us towards each other and enable socialisation. Utility of leadership. When a company's leadership vision and learnings of ethical program are coherent, then the ethics program tends to be effective. The Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organisations encourage companies to assess their key risks and customise a program to address these risks. These programs must be communicated to all employees by providing them with a common understanding of organisational values, policies and procedures. Companies that act to prevent organisational misconduct may receive a carrot and avoid organisational penalties. Companies that do not act to prevent organisational misconduct may receive a stick, including fines and penalties. We have learned that through an ethics program, legal problems can be avoided. An ethics program can have various goals. However, the objective is always to establish effective organisational control system and to create predictability in employee behaviour. The two types of control systems that can be created are 1. Compliance orientation. 2. Values orientation. Let's look at the difference between these two types of orientation. 1. Compliance orientation. This creates order by requiring that employees identify with and commit to specified conduct. It uses legal terms, statutes and contracts that teach employees the rules and penalties for non-compliance. 2. Values orientation. This attempts to develop shared values. It focuses more on an abstract core of ideals such as respect and responsibility, accountability and commitment, although there are penalties for misconduct. Let's now look at the minimum requirements for ethical compliance programs. 1. Standards and procedures, such as code of ethics, that are reasonably capable of detecting and preventing misconduct. 2. High-level personnel, known as ethics officers, who are responsible for an ethics and compliance program. 3. No substantial discretionary authority given to individuals with a propensity for misconduct. 4. Standards and procedures communicated effectively via ethics training programs. 5. Establishment of systems to monitor, audit and report misconduct. 6. Consistent enforcement of standards, codes and punishment. 7. Continuous improvement of the ethical compliance program. Let's look in more detail at Code of Ethics. Most companies begin the process of establishing organisational ethics programs by developing codes of conduct. Such statements may take three different forms. 1. Principles or rules. These are a comprehensive document consisting of general statements that serve as principles and the basis for the rules of conduct. 2. Expectations. These are formal statements that describe what an organisation expects of its employees. 3. Statement of values. This serves the general public and addresses stakeholder interests. Let's now look at ethics officers. Ethics officers or ethics committees are responsible for oversight of the ethics or compliance program. The responsibility of ethics officers include 1. Assessing the needs and risks that an organisation-wide ethics program must address. 2. Develop, revise and disseminate the code. 3. Conduct training programs for employees. 4. Develop effective communication. 5. Make sure the company is in compliance with government regulations. 6. Establish audits and control systems. 7. Take action on possible violations of the code. 8. Review and modify the program to improve effectiveness. Let's now look at how not to give substantial discretionary authority to individuals with a propensity for misconduct. This provides a guideline saying, don't give somebody that you don't trust the opportunity to act unethically by giving them an important job. For example, to place an employee in a position where it's easy to steal money or confidential information. Instead, give them a job where they do not have the chance to act unethically. We'll now look at the key elements for successful ethics training programs. A successful ethics program must 1. Help employees identify the ethical dimensions of a business decision. 2. Give employees a means to address ethical issues. 3. Help employees understand the ambiguity inherent in ethical situations. 4. Make employees aware that their actions define the company's ethical posture both internally and externally. 5. Provide direction for employees to find managers or others who can help them resolve ethical conflicts. 6. Eliminate the belief that unethical behaviour is ever justifiable by stressing that stretching the ethical boundaries results in unethical behaviour. Whether discovered or not, an unethical act is just that. An unethical act is never in the best interests of the company. The firm is held responsible for the misconduct of its members. Now we'll look at the establishment of systems to monitor, audit and report misconduct. A company must establish an internal system for employees to report misconduct and provide an opportunity to register ethical concerns. Many companies set up ethics assistance lines, also known as hotlines, to provide support and give employees the opportunity to ask questions or report concerns. Some provide questionnaires to serve as benchmarks in an ongoing assessment of ethical performance. We'll now look at the importance of consistent enforcement. Consistent enforcement of standards, codes and punishment are essential to a functional ethics or compliance program. There are two aspects of consistent enforcement. 1. Corrective actions to provide standards and punishment. 2. Publicising how matters are dealt with. The final aspect is the continual improvement of ethics compliance programs. Revisions and continuous improvements of the ethics program is needed to get the desired results of the training program. So far, we have learnt the minimum requirement for ethical compliance programs. However, it's also essential to be aware of the common mistakes in designing or implementing an ethics program. These mistakes are: 1. Not having a clear understanding of the goals of the program from the beginning. 2. Not setting realistic and measurable program objectives. 3. Senior management's failure to take ownership of the ethics program. 4. Developing program materials that do not address the needs of the average employee. 5. Transferring a domestic program internationally. 6. Designing a program as a series of lectures with less focus on real learning. That concludes this lecture. You should now understand the need for organisational programs to avoid legal problems. You will know the difference between systems and the minimum requirement for an ethical compliance program. And you'll have a familiarity with common mistakes when designing an ethics program. Thank you for taking the time to view this lecture.